My name is Matthew Nee, and I'm here to present to you guys Boeing's evolution of corporate values from customers' confidence to profit imperatives, a case study in cultural decay and the loss of public trust. So, there was a time when Boeing symbolized engineering greatness, safety, and strong commitment to customer satisfaction. It was respected across the aviation world. However, in recent years, Boeing has been partially criticized for moving away from these values. Many now believe the company has prioritized financial outcomes at the cost of its foundational principles. This shift has led to tragic consequences and a major loss of public trust. The purpose of the study is to explore how this transformation occurred, considering internal business decisions, outside market pressures, and regulatory failure. The deeper goal is to understand how and why Boeing changed and what it would take to recover what it once stood for. Corporate identity is more than a brand name. It is the values, actions, and priorities that define how a company is perceived. Boeing once had a strong identity based on quality, engineering, pride, and public trust. These values were not just words, they shaped everyday decisions from how aircraft were designed to how safety was ensured. A company's identity becomes clear not through slogans, but through its behavior during both success and crisis. Boeing's early identity helped it thrive. But when what but when that identity began to shift, the results were far-reaching. Boeing's early culture was deeply rooted in a safety-first mindset. Engineers had a major influence in shaping products. Planes like the 747 and 777 became icons of safe and reliable aviation. Newhouse described Boeing's post-World War II approach as a triangle of excellence, engineering innovation, safety, and close relations with airline customers. This triangle wasn't abstract, it was real. Reflected in daily collaboration, Sabah highlighted this in the 777 program, where engineers worked closely with partners, reinforcing trust. It's important to reflect on how rare this kind of corporate harmony is. The people building the planes felt ownership, pride, and responsibility. Customers trusted the brand not because of its marketing, but because it had earned that trust through consistency and safety. The 1997 merger with McDonnell Douglas changed Boeing's path. According to USEAM, this moment marked the beginning of a new culture, focused more on financial goals than engineering excellence. Stone Cipher, a McDonnell Douglas executive who became Boeing's CEO, openly claimed credit for this cultural shift. His quote, "When people say I changed the culture of Boeing, that was the intent," shows just how deliberate the change was. As someone looking at this as both a student and a concerned observer, it's troubling to see a company once built on expertise move toward a strategy driven by numbers. Engineering used to lead decision making, now financial metrics became the main guide. In the 2000s, Boeing's leadership began to prioritize profits and stock price over long-term safety and research. Lazonick explained how Boeing's top leaders spent billions on stock buybacks instead of R&D. These decisions signaled that profit was now more important than product quality. Boeing also outsourced major software development to cheaper contractors, which contributed to the design failures. This shift had real consequences. The 737 MAX crashes were not isolated accidents. They were the result of a system that ignored risk to meet deadlines and satisfy investors. Internal employee warnings were disregarded. It's painful to realize what lives were lost because business decisions overruled engineering concerns. The Congressional Investigative Report confirmed these failures. Boeing's internal problems were exacerbated by some serious regulatory failures. In the past, the FAA played a strong oversight role in aircraft certification. With the rise of the Organization Designation Authorization Program, or the ODA, the FAA phased out some of this insight as it authorized significant certification authority to Boeing in the self-certification process. The Congressional Investigation Report stated that the FAA used the ODA program to approve the safety features, which allowed employee safety features to be signed off by Boeing instead of independent regulators, thus creating a clear conflict of interest. One of the most troubling consequences of this arrangement was the approval of the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or the MCAS. Flight control software later ruled to be the leading cause of the two 737 MAX crashes. The report concluded that the FAA failed to exercise proper oversight of MCAS, and the agency lacked the technical understanding to thoroughly evaluate the implications of MCAS. Boeing actively refuted the risks of this decision if it did not include MCAS in documentations to avoid pilot training requirements. In internal documents, one Boeing employee noted that if we emphasize MCAS too much, it could be classified as a stall recognition or protection system and would be subject to training. The effect of this regulatory structure clearly resulted in the disaster of the two crashes. The FAA documented a limited number of external reviews on MCAS certification and did not inform pilots of the system prior to takeoff. 346 persons died and 346 people died in the Lion Air and Ethiopian airline crashes. Trust in the public is not easy to restore after a tragedy. The 2020 Edelman Trust Barometer tells us there is a trust issue after erosion of trust in all institutions. No institution out of the four societal sectors, government, business, NGOs, and media, was seen to be competent and ethical. Business was seen as competent 60%, 4% of the time, but not ethical. Government was seen as incompetent and unethical. This demonstrates that trust is low. This is important to mention as it demonstrates a hurdle to overcome for Boeing to rebuild trust and its reputation. Boeing needs to take those steps to regain trust, implement substantial changes beyond just an apology. This includes changing leadership, investigating in engineering excellence, and improving with full transparency. I am studying the case, and I want to believe change is possible, as long as Boeing changes back to who they are, their safety culture, and their accountability to people, not just shareholders. The cultural decay within Boeing can be understood using theories of organizational behavior. Vaughan's 1996 idea of normalization of deviance explains how companies can grow used to small risk until they become dangerous. Other scholars showed how Boeing's leadership created distance, both physical and cultural, from engineering by moving headquarters to Chicago. This sent a signal. Decision makers were no longer in touch with those ensured product safety. Boeing's evolution fits into a broader field of study known as financialization, the diversion of corporate attention away from long-term investment to short-term financial returns. Lazonick and Shin viewed Boeing as an example of predatory value extraction, where the chief executive's compensation scheme was linked to the company's stock performance, and this was the basis for their chief executive to focus on share price rather than either innovation or safety. During the period of 2013 to 2019, Boeing had spent over $43 billion on stock buybacks. That money would have been used for research and development or improving product safety in previous decades. The change resulting from the financial crisis and its aftermath was not solely financial, it was also cultural. Flickstein observed, the finance conception of control, or the replacement of technical expertise and product development with a managerial strategy of financial engineering. Boeing was a clear example of this transition. It used to be led by engineers, and over time, the company began to be run by people from financial and managerial backgrounds. The transition was no longer about configuring the world's safest and most reliable aircraft. It was about managing investor expectations and quarterly earnings. The cultural shift also played a significant role in the series of numerous missteps leading to the 737 MAX crisis. And Boeing continues to grapple with overcoming this issue. Furthermore, Cahill showed how deregulation let Boeing avoid oversight. The FAA's reliance on designated authority programs gave Boeing too much control. Stiglitz included Boeing in his analysis of regulatory capture in dominant industries. These outside forces made it easier for Boeing to keep cutting corners. Recent research suggests that although Boeing will face difficulties, it is possible for the company to recover, but it must meet certain conditions. Improving will not be easy, nor is it guaranteed, and it will take more than superficial changes. Based on this research, we have a number of takeaways. 1. Trust will need operational change. Moves in that direction must begin with operational changes for Boeing, particularly with regards to transparency, accountability, and governing itself internally. 2. Total cultural change will be required. Sheen, 2021, pointed out that Boeing must take the equivalent of Ford's action after the Pinto disaster. At a minimum, this action should align the company's principle with essential trustworthy behaviors related to engineering excellence and safety. 3. Admitting failure will be important. Boeing will need to be candid with the public. If Boeing does not take the position that its culture of financialization, the, the action of its own leaders, and the influence of regulatory capture all contributed to the crisis, its recovery will never appear sincere. 4. Returning to core values is the only path to recovery. To recover, Boeing needs to reconnect with its core, valuing engineers, safety culture, and long-term innovation over short-term stock price growth. Boeing will only be able to start rebuilding trust with regulators, customers, and the public once it reconnects with its core. Overall, recovery is possible, but the only way to recover is for Boeing and its leadership to be willing to make large, system-wide changes and accept the risk associated with those changes. Trust cannot be rebuilt if the same priorities and leadership style that causes its demise continue. Although much can be written about Boeing's cultural decline and corporate transformation, there are holes in the literature that prevents us from fully understanding this crisis. One hole exists because of the lack of comparison with other engineering-led corporations like General Electric or Westinghouse that have experienced similar transformations. Analysis of these organizations' responses to the pressure of financialization, changes in leadership, and regulatory changes would be helpful to understand whether Boeing is an outlier or merely one instance of a broader trend or pattern in American industry. Another underexplored area is the lived experience of Boeing workers during this shift to a finance-driven culture. Ethnographic or qualitative research that documents how Boeing employees, including engineers, designers, and frontline workers, experienced and adapted to a cultural shift from a culture built around safety/risk to a culture built around cost and shareholder value would be invaluable evidence about how internal cultures can evolve and devolve. These voices are largely absent in academic or media accounts, but I believe are crucial to understanding how values are extinguished or sustained within organizations. Ultimately, little attention has been placed on the long-term effects of Boeing's change on its ability to innovate. As Airbus continues to gain traction in many of the company's strategic areas, including sustainable aviation and digital cockpit designs, it is uncertain whether Boeing has the internal coherence and technical authority to regain lost ground. The dismantling of the company's engineering-driven culture not only arguably contributed to a safety crisis, but will likely further inhibit Boeing's ability to innovate in the foreseeable future. Future research needs to examine whether Boeing's internal structure can still produce industry-led innovation, or whether it has permanently lost the high productive resource that was its innovation process. Boeing's fall is a warning. When companies put short-term profits ahead of long-term values, they risk everything. This research hopes to explain not just what went wrong, but how it could be made right. If Boeing learns from its mistakes, it may once again earn the trust of passengers, engineers, and the world. Thank you for listening. And here are my references.